Hello there. I'm Rob Hudson with Frost Brown Todd, and I assist the Northern Kentucky Bar Association in coordinating its Legends Series. The NKBA Legends Series serves our legal profession by providing information to inspire and guide attorneys in developing their law practices. We present interviews of attorneys and judges who've made their mark on the community and on the profession here in Northern Kentucky. Our hope is to present a unique opportunity to hear their candid comments and learn from their experiences. During the program today, if you have questions for our interviewee, please present them using the comment or public chat feature. And at the end of the program, we'll follow up on as many of those questions as time permits. Turning to today's program, we're pleased and proud to be joined by Judge Patricia Summe. Judge Summe serves as the Chief Circuit Court Judge for the 16th Judicial District, which presides over Kenton County. She has now served as a judge for more than 20 years. Judge Summe's history of community service to the bench and to the profession has been exemplary. In 2008, the Kentucky Bar Association presented her with its Outstanding Judge Award, and she later received the Salmon P. Chase Alumni Association Exceptional Service Award. She has also received the Martin Luther King Award from the Kenton County chapter of the NAACP. And along the way, she's also served as president of Redwood in our community, and she became the Kentucky Post Woman of the Year. Judge Summe, welcome to our NKBA Legends program.
Thank you, Rob. It's really my pleasure to be here with everyone. I hope they have a good lunch and they come to see me talk again, which they get to do on a regular basis when we're in court.
We appreciate your support at the NKBA, and I'm just going to launch right in, as is typical with these Legends programs. We start at the beginning with, prior to the time you were a practicing lawyer, to talk a little bit about your background. And let's begin with early influences shaping you as the professional and the esteemed judge that you've become today.
All right. So early on, I tried to bring this picture today, but I think mostly I've been shaped by family and faith. My father was a lawyer, so as a kid, he used to take us to work at night in order to give my mother a break, and we would run around the old record room and pull out books for him so he could do his practice. But he was what you'd call a real stand-up guy. He always had you in dialogue at the dining room table about the issues of the day and about right and wrong, and was a very faithful individual. So he made sure faith was a very important part of your life. My family was great. Had 5 siblings, 1 brother. Some people may have known my brother Pete, who practiced for a long time. We called him Pete. He's a nice guy, Summe, because every time you talked to everybody, they'd say, "Oh, Pete, oh, he's such a nice guy." And he was. And so I practiced with him. After I went to grade school, high school at Notre Dame, I went to Xavier University, and then I kind of fought deciding going into the practice, because that's, I wanted to find my own path, but the path happened to lead me there. So I chose to accept it, went to Chase, enjoyed that experience at night because I wanted to work. And I couldn't afford to take myself out of town for school. And so worked with my brother and my father for the early beginnings there, doing title searches, and actually was a secretary for most of the beginning of that when I was ending up in college and through law school. And so, and then I have to also add a big influence, my friends. I was really lucky to have chosen and been accepted by some really remarkable other women who were great friends we hung around with, since we were in like the 2nd grade. So I think those are the people who shape you and teach you how to communicate with one another. And so those are probably the people most influential in making me who I am. Plus that personality God gives you when you're born. And I don't know that you have much control over that. So
it sounds like you knew from early on that the legal profession was maybe an option, or that it was maybe the only option for you.
Well, I really really, like most young people, I kind of struggled about what I wanted to do. I didn't have any particular, I can't sing. I can sew, mezza mezza. I'm not an artist. And so you knew that you were going to have to do something in the business field. So, and then my father was just such a source of mentorship that I liked what he did, and he dabbled in politics as well as the law. So I always thought I would be a legislator. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I went into political science because I thought that would be a lot of fun, and going to Washington or doing something like that. And then as you mature, you know, the real business of the rule of law hits you in the face and you go, yeah, that's what I want to do. But I think, you know, your background grooms you a lot for what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think you had political science as your undergrad major.
Yep.
So, and that was at Xavier, right?
Yes, I was at Xavier. And, you know, of course, what was new then is new now. So, you know, some of the conversations that the nation is having now were conversations that we had when I was in college back in the 70s. So some of the same books people are reading, some of the same arguments that people are having were those same arguments that were happening back in the 70s. So things change, but not that much.
Well, you know, with this series, we hope that we'll have law students and newer lawyers viewing the videos, and particularly for the law students, looking back on it, what are your thoughts on law school and the keys to success in law school for you?
The key to success for law school was understanding and realizing that even though I had some pretty good mentors, you really had to buckle down and study and absorb and make what you were learning part of who you were, as opposed to something that you were just learning. And so that was a real revelation, learning that there were other ways to think and not just react. Even though I had, again, a great education, was really eye-opening. Dealing with everything that was always serious, there was nothing that was really frivolous about what you were learning, was eye-opening. So the advice would be buckle down and study and enjoy it, and then find the differences in those little cases that you're being presented. Because in the final analysis, I think in life, just like anything else, it's those little bit of things that change everything enough that it's important to you and your life goal and the path you choose.
Right, right, excellent. Well, so you graduated law school, and I understand that early on you were in private practice. Well, for some time even. How did that come about, and what were your practice areas prior to becoming a judge?
Well, when I first got out, of course, like everybody else, I was a starving young lawyer. And so I went to work for my father, which was great, and something I really wanted, actually, to go with a big law firm. I actually wanted to go into JAG Corps, and, you know, but you need to make some money, you need to make some decisions. So I started working with him, and it worked out, you know, really well. And then he died early on in my career. And so I stayed with my brother, and we became pretty successful. I practiced for about 15, 16 years and as a solo practitioner, brought family law into that practice, because you always want to have something that's just yours. And I wasn't, of course, as well known in the community as my dad. So he brought the corporate and the real estate and the probate to the practice, which I helped him do, and represented a lot of individuals doing that. And so the real estate piece is something I still love. I love real estate, and it's been very helpful to me since I've been on the bench. So that's about it.
And then after your civil practice, I believe prior to becoming a judge, you had an opportunity to gain some criminal experience as well, right?
Yes. Well, yes. And I forgot, I did represent 2 cities, which is got all kinds of things going for it, as well as law enforcement. And so you didn't actually represent law enforcement officers, but you dealt with those ordinances, you dealt with anything that went wrong, you dealt with their civil rights actions. And so that was always interesting. And then towards the end of that, I went to work with the county attorney. And so I did criminal law from the prosecutorial segment for about a year, 6 months to a year. And that's about the time I decided to run for judge.
I mean, and it seems like an excellent background, to provide you with a good foundation to serve as a judge. I know, nowadays I'm a labor lawyer, and even within the field of labor law, a lot of the newer lawyers are focusing on just one area of labor law. And you had a very broad swath of opportunities, it sounds like, and I'm sure that helped.
Well, I'm the product, of the liberal arts education. And so, and one of the things that's nice about the bench is you get to learn and see all aspects. And so I do think the broader your background, the more successful you can be, even in the narrow, because you have the opportunity to understand the impact. I mean, I think when we were in law school, they always talked about the web. And so, one thing always interacts with the other thing. And I think that's the same with real estate, even with criminal law. My background in criminal law in real estate has been really helpful, believe it or not, in all the work we do now in criminal law. So I would suggest everybody should always try to get an experience. Focusing is an economic decision, and it's a great decision, and we need experts. But I don't think you can be an expert if you don't know how other places react to your decision making and how that will impact your client.
Well, when you were a newer lawyer and you were in private practice, were there pivotal events for you as you're striving to become proficient in the law? For me, for example, I had a couple of experiences where people came down on me pretty hard within a law firm, say, look, this is not good enough, you need to do better. And at the time it was so painful, but I look back on it and it was the very best thing for me. I really needed it at the time. Did you have pivotal events where you were trying to become the best lawyer you could be?
Oh yeah, well, early on, again, my law firm was not criminal oriented, although my brother did a lot of prosecution as well. And we had some criminal lawyers who were sharing office space with us. But I, did the whole, I'll be, a conflict PD thing. And I got a pretty big case and just didn't know how to manipulate the communication between the police officers and the prosecutors. And so there was a lovely lawyer who doesn't practice anymore by the name of Rob Lotz, who was there. And it was pretty stunning for me to go and say, this may not work out real well for this fella. You need to help me, and you need to help me now. It was very humbling, learning how to open up to communication as opposed to people just coming to you. So yeah, that was pretty humbling. That guy landed okay, but thanks to Bob Lotz, that was really early on, and that was really humbling. And the other one was, I do have to say this, Judge Galeese said to me once, I'll never forget this. He said, Miss Summe, you've won your point, sit down. Okay.
The less is more lesson, right? Other than your father, were there mentors? I guess Pete was a little bit younger than you, is that right? Or
no, Pete was my older brother. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All
he
right.
was my wingman. Yes.
Yeah, and you mentioned Pete. I know we're here doing a formal program, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say how much I enjoyed working with Pete and how beloved he really was and how missed he is today.
He was a nice guy.
Yeah, he was a very nice guy indeed. And so did he have just a few years on you or?
Yeah, we were like 20 some months apart, and
okay.
So he's the guy I ran with in the backyard, and it was his group of friends that always said, get your sister out of here. And he was always nice about it, but he got me out of there. And yeah, so we grew up together. We actually went to Xavier together. He went to X High, but when we landed back in college, we were together. Dated some of my friends, which was sometimes good, sometimes bad. But we spent a lot of time together in college and then went to practice together. And we became really good friends as well as brother and sister.
Yeah. Well, did you know when did you know you wanted to be a judge, and how did that really happen? And as a bit of further personal commentary, for someone like me, I mean, just the thought of running for judge or becoming a judge is just daunting. So was it something that was rattling around for a while, that this is something maybe that you could do or should do with your life?
No, I mean, it really wasn't. Like I said, I was in political science, and I thought that if there was anything I wanted to do, it was legislature. And somewhere like just the 2 years before I ran, it just started forming in my head, and I don't know where, where people say your paths diverge, and it was just there one day. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, could I really do it? And then, you talk to some people and you think, well, can I really do it? Now, some people say you can and some don't. And when you think that all your talents kind of converge and that might be a good thing for you to do, I just said, oh, okay, I'm going to run. And some people were shocked, others not, but it really just came out of the blue. So again, I think that faith component comes in. You're called to do certain things and you don't know why. And it was as shocking to me, but as natural when I thought about it. So out of the blue.
Did you win your first race?
Nope.
No, then you came back for more.
Yes, I know. I ran against Frank Trustee and Sarah Sidebottom, and of course Frank was quite a well-known figure and a prominent Commonwealth attorney, and it was the first time he had women running as much, and then then I don't remember the numbers real well, but I think we kind of split that vote. So one or the other of us probably could have won, but we didn't. So Frank was elected, and that was for district court, which was really not my forte, but that's what I ran for when that thought popped into my head and I decided to do it.
Well, another thing about being a judge is if you're moving from private practice to being on the bench, the idea that there's got to be a learning curve. And how does the training process work? Are there other judges who help you along? Is there a course that you take to help teach you how to become a judge, or is it just something that you're expected to know or pick up automatically?
No, everybody was lovely, and they do expect you to know some, but they were lovely. Everybody sends you tape. Back in the day, so it's been 26 years, going on 27, since I was on the bench and way before technology. So they sent me tapes from judge school, from one of their judge schools, and then some of the other judges gave me their colloquies for criminals, pleas, and then you just take a deep breath and you work a lot of nights and ask a lot of questions and just hope that you get it right and just make sure unlike being the lawyer, you just take a pause and say, I've got to get off the bench, and you just have to not be embarrassed to go get the information that you need to try to make the best decision that you can. One of the hardest things to do, and I think all judges struggle with that, and I think young attorneys struggle with this too, is taking your personality and fitting it to the role that you're in. And so when you first get on the bench, you're very advocacy oriented because that's what you're trained in. So, the trying to move yourself away going, well, they're right, you're wrong, just, trying to listen and absorb it all so that before you make that statement, you hear all the facts. That was really hard. And so I think that happens with people who practice through prosecution and then move to defense and vice versa. So I think it's always learning your personality and listening. And yeah, that's hard. Sometimes it's still hard when people bring in real estate. I'm going, well, they're right. You got to sit back and go, nope, you got to listen to the whole thing. So still hard.
Well, one of the things that we talked about during every one of these interviews, it seems like there's a common theme that, the idea, and I remember as a newer lawyer, and I'd just gotten out of law school, which was arduous. And, I don't think I was ready for the commitment of time and the fact that as a lawyer, it becomes your life, so much of your life, not all of your life, but it's hard to, it's kind of blurry. Like when your individual persona and your life as a lawyer, you're all in many respects. And I was hoping maybe to to ask you to comment on what it really took, bottom line, in terms of your time commitment and life commitment to accomplish some of the things that you've accomplished.
Well, I think you do have to be all in. And, I worked during the day and went to law school at night. So I was all in from the beginning. And so, I did have a social life, but it was pretty limited. I made friends at law school, so that helped so that you could do things with them. We used to sometimes on Saturday make ourselves go to a museum just to pretend that we had a life. And then when I started practicing, everything is, all in, just writing a simple letter to make sure that it's not offensive, that it's conveys your point. And then you have to do that community piece, which we may talk about later, which is you need to start getting your name out there so that you have clients. And you need to, at least in my day, you would sign up for, they do GALs now, but back then you represented young juveniles, and you did that through the public defender, and you got paid very little for sitting in 1A for a long time to represent someone so that you could listen and learn. And so you had to fit that in. And if you had a private practice, go back and do that. Then later, as I my practice matured a little, and I was able to represent some cities. Cities all have night meetings. And that was a whole different piece of real estate for me as well. I did title work and I did zoning work for the coming in, but actually flipping through the zoning book and going through the planning and zoning and making sure that the ordinances were okay and they were getting ready for all of that planning, and going to those meetings, and you're all in. And so you really do at some point worry about whether you have a life or not. And you're fitting your charity work in, not just because you want to, but because it's also good for you. So, all of your community work was very dual oriented. So I would get to work at 9 because I did so many night meetings, and I was out sometimes till 9 working, and every other day it might be a little bit earlier, about 6. And so, all in, you go home, you eat, you start it again. And I think time commitment is the most draining thing, but I really don't know anything that you do well that doesn't take a time commitment. And our profession, just because it's a profession as opposed to just a job, you have to be self-motivated about your time and say, I'm going to commit to that. And if you have some other priority that you have to take time away from, then you need to readjust how you approach your profession, because because your clients are on the clock 24/7, and so you need to have that backup to be on the clock 24/7.
And the more you work, the quicker you're going to become proficient and,
yes.
and an excellent lawyer. And well, forgive this very broad and general question, but we had to ask. Could you describe your style or approach in running your court? If I don't know if there is a certain style or approach, but if you could share with our lawyers how you view your role on the bench and how you approach things.
Well, my approach is generally to try to be time effective, try to be direct. I thought I was direct as an earlier judge. I think maybe I wasn't as direct, but just a little bit more defensive. Now I'm really direct. I don't know if that makes it better, but it makes it quicker. And I try to be truthful. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm perhaps not as empathetic as people think that I should be, but I don't see my role generally as being empathetic. I think my role is to make sure that people understand the jeopardy they're in, and that while I want to see them get help, my job is not to fool them, especially in the criminal arena, as to what they're facing. And so it's pretty direct. I think in some ways my approach is softer, in other ways it's more direct. So it's the same, only it's kind of shifted a little, some of that based on age. I'm not as impatient as I was when I was first on the bench, because I like to see things just move. I think a lot of people don't realize that The Supreme Court has rules in terms of timing. So, you're always looking at your caseload. You're always trying to make sure that you move it. It's sort of like clients, but is that case moving, or are you, for some reason, not being as attentive to the caseload as you should be? And in reality, that's good because it's about the citizens of the Commonwealth. Are you paying attention to the citizens of the Commonwealth? So I consider myself a working judge. So you try to make sure you get your work done. I do have some, so I think I'm a little softer. I think I'm more direct than I used to be. Even in civil cases, I'm pretty direct about the problems that I have in some civil cases. So I tell people those areas where I'm not inclined to be forgiving, and I expect for them to follow those rules. I'm also more aware that everybody, including myself, makes mistakes. So when something happens and I know it's not intentional, I'm probably not as harsh as I may have been as a young person, thinking everything was intentional. And I think as a young person, like everyone, I think you have control of everything. The older you get, chaos reigns. You just want to make sure you have enough control to keep everything moving forward.
Hold it together, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, pretty much what you see, you get.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And every one of our legends has, including yourself, Judge, just had an incredible track record and experiences and achievements on community service. And so we always love to ask you about your views on community service for members of our profession and how they should approach that.
Well, the saying goes, you get back more than you give. And I think that pretty much talks about community service. My family was much into community service. My first stint, aside from working around the church a bit here and there, my mother didn't drive, so you had to walk yourself to some of your community service. I was a candy striper up at St. Charles, and so that entailed at a young age, still in grade school, some bedpans and making beds and having some older people who didn't feel well kind of yelling at you. But, it was we trudged up there twice a week, and that was a learning experience. You learn a lot about people. And so, I think I always have gotten something back, and I've always learned something about myself. Again, that difference between being direct and being softly direct. I've always learned about what I could put up with, what other skills I had. Pretty good with old people. Now that I'm one, I'm glad about that. And, so I think it's really important to be involved with your community because, actually that's what judging is about, being involved with your community and trying to let people know that they're in harm's way, but also there's help there if they need it. So community has always been really important. I do think in the past couple of years, I've not been as involved. And I think we kind of talked about this a little in the pre-interview. You find you just don't have as much energy. So,
you're right.
So you say, gee, I'm going home tonight and I'm sitting in my Barker Lounger for a while. I'm not going to go out again and do something. So I do think that, but that commitment brings a real community to you. And being single, a lot of younger people with families who are also practicing law, they get a lot of community out of doing that work in and around their children's activities. They're involved in the festival, they're involved with kids learning things, they're involved with babysitting, they're involved with helping their friends out, which is community service. It just doesn't have to be formal community service, which will draw them into other things. And kids nowadays all have to have community service, so we know their parents are doing it at the same time as the kids are. So it's a different kind of community service. And through that, I know young people nowadays make great friends. And I did too. I was on the board of Redwood for a really long time, president for a shorter period, but always on the board. One of our chief obligations, believe it or not, was helping to run bingo. And so every fourth Sunday, I would be at bingo with all the smoke. Nobody smokes anymore, but back then, even with oxygen, everybody sat around and smoked and played bingo and, made great friends with people who I saw once a month and great friends with the people that I worked with there. And I was on parish council for a while at St. Agnes and really enjoyed working on all their endeavors. that's how I got involved with the youth group up there, which was great fun. I took them camping twice. There was no third time. And so, but I learned a lot about their parents. So I think community service is the way you grow in your faith and in your community. And it reminds you what your community is about and how responsible you are to make sure your community thrives, and how responsible you are in putting back into it, because you can't just sit home and fester. You've got to be involved, or else you have no control of the community. And so, yeah.
And Redwood is just one of the most amazing places in the world, and that had to be very rewarding to be on the board and to preside there for a period of time.
Well, I was there when Redwood's always transitioning. And, in every nonprofit, as you know, transitions because of money and purpose and all those kinds of things. So I was there when it transitioned 2 or 3 times. I think they've transitioned at least twice since then, always in a good way. But, it's always a challenge. As you know, you represent corporations for transitions.
And just for the newer lawyers out there, there's not a book that's going to tell you how the community works. And, the only way to really learn is just in the field, helping. And
it is.
It's possible to have that sort of rewarding career. The lines blur, but, the community needs the analytical skills that you bring to the table, the ability to speak and write. And along the way, you can learn so much. And I know that's happened for you, judges, as well.
And I do think the one thing, you can't sit back and wait for people to ask you. You've got to see what's out there that's interesting to you, whether it's your school board, whether it's a Redwood, whether it's, you've got to kind of make the ask yourself. I think a lot of people sit back and, well, I wasn't asked to do that. Well, there's plenty of opportunities out there. And so I actually was asked early on to work with Redwood, and I went in just kind of a member and helped with some little bits. And so little by little, then you start saying, well, I'll do that and I'll do that. So, but the ask is important on your own part to say, I want to be involved with this.
Yeah, and people say yes when you
Yes.
offer. And I know your service is it's stretched beyond community and to the judiciary. And if you could just briefly share with us your service to the legal profession and the judiciary, beyond your day job as a judge.
Well, again, as I told everybody, one of my first loves was the legislature, right? And so over the past couple of years, probably 5 now, I started going down because of different pieces of legislation I heard about and was not over fond of, and started showing up and just saying, I want to be on the agenda because this isn't quite right. So been working with that, and I'm now president of the Circuit Judges Association for the state of Kentucky. And am trying to make that association a little bit more legislatively driven, in a sense that, we want to make sure that the laws that are drafted that affect us substantively can be looked at. I just finished reading most of the minutes of this association since 1970. And it's pretty funny because that's really what the association started out with, talking about whether or not they should be getting involved with this. I'm also very interested in their pension, but that situation's changed a lot. But, I first spoke about a real estate issue, which was a receivership issue. And still they call me to talk about that. I think that's 5 years later. Then we got involved with some bond issues. I'm currently talking about some remote virtual court issues in terms of whether or not they should be statutory, which we don't believe it should be. And so basically the leadership now is to try to, in my view, give judges a voice, not to be lobbyists, but to let everyone know we've got lots of experience in the courtroom. So we know what works and what doesn't. We know what we're going to look at and say it's unconstitutional versus constitutional, which I think saves the statute from having to go to court. First of all, if you can help try to put it on its right path to begin with, trying not to interfere with the substantive idea of the legislatures, which is theirs, but trying to at least say, if you're going to do this, which we may or may not like, please do it this way. Then there are certain things we think might step on our toes. I think the most important thing that to me now, I won't say in the twilight, I don't intend to retire, everybody out there. I know there's a couple rumors, not doing it. But in any event, I think one of the most important things is the independence of the judiciary, and not just for the judiciary itself. You know, when other groups try to tell judges what to say and do, that's not good. And while you may not like a particular judge or may not like how they preside, the bottom line is independence in terms of thought and decision-making is extraordinarily important to our system of government. We've only got 3 branches. And, you know, and sometimes they treat the judiciary as if we're an agency. I know I'm starting to lecture. I'm starting to sound like I'm in my courtroom, which I am. But, you know, it's really important. And more importantly, it's important for your children and your grandchildren, because the line between freedom and not might end up in the 3rd branch. And I think Shakespeare has a few quotes about that anyway. So I think it's important for lawyers to get involved with a free and independent judiciary. And that's not saying all judges are good and that some of us don't make bad decisions and some of us need to be reprimanded, but it's saying the institution itself is so important. And young lawyers need to know that we're at a precipice regarding all branches of government, and you can choose your side of the precipice. I know which side I'd like you to choose, but you can choose the side of your precipice, but you should do that. And that's what your education really brings to the fore that others do not.
Yeah, you know, when lawyers practice before you or from your perspective on the bench, what are some of the key areas of professional responsibility from your perspective? How lawyers present themselves in their cases, and whether you see ethics issues, you know, arising in cases.
Well, the most important thing, of course, is your responsibility to your client, which means that you've got to be prepared. And so I think that one of the scariest things, you know, and even I thought about coming out here to talk tonight, and I've been on the bench talking for 26 years, you know, how you present it is not always really the milestone. You know, if you watched a Columbo, I watched a lawyer once, he acted like Columbo. He was so effective, even though he kept dropping his pen and the jury just loved him. Presentation is helpful. Persuasion is helpful. But, you know, judges know when you're prepared. Judges know when you've got that little nuance I talked about earlier on that makes you go, well, you know, they're right. You know, this person shouldn't have a bond this high, or this person shouldn't be free, or the Commonwealth should drop this particular charge. And so preparedness is your first responsibility to your client. And the second responsibility to the court means in that preparedness, you can only do so much for your client with regard to presentation. You're not allowed to be dishonest to the court. You're not allowed to suborn perjury. So I have a lot of lawyers, and I just wrote this down because they did it a couple of times this morning, especially in the criminal field, mostly in the criminal field. And they'll say, well, Your Honor, that could have happened because that's my fault. Well, you know, if you really did not act professionally, if you really weren't prepared and it's your fault, I'll accept that. But most of the time, everyone wants to use it as an excuse, knowing a judge is not going to go, oh, well, I don't want to treat so-and-so badly. You know, don't cover up for your clients. That's not your job. So if you're not prepared because your client didn't show up to see you, that's what happened. Not that you didn't call him, you didn't text him. And I think that taking the blame for your clients just because you're acting as an agent for your client is not healthy for you, not healthy for your responsibility, doesn't speak well to your responsibility as a professional. You know, again, that's that directness. You got to say, this is what happened. This is why it happened. I've talked to my client. We're working on it. And, you know, we'll find a remedy together. And that's much more honorable and acceptable. So that's one of the things I think has bothered me the most, lawyers taking responsibility when I know they're good lawyers and they shouldn't be doing that. So preparedness, responsibility to the bench, and then timeliness. Now I know as we've gotten more efficient and we have more technology, everybody expects everyone to be somewhere all the time. And I do think that we need to learn how to be more forgiving about that. And so if you can't get your client on a certain docket, don't overbook. Just say, I know, well, he's going to fire me if I'm not there. So I'm going to double book, and this judge will understand I'm here and understand I'm there. Well, maybe, but maybe not, because, maybe I'm having one of those days where I have 70 instead of 50 people on my docket and there's no grace available. So you can't always depend on the other person to give you grace. And that goes back to that client's your first responsibility. So that's kind of it mostly. Like everyone else, I can claim sometimes I'm not as prepared as I should be. And so, and I'll call foul on myself. I generally let people know that, like, wait a minute, I didn't have time last night. Again, I'm going to blame age on that, but probably not. I could have stayed that extra 5 minutes to find out. So yeah, sometimes judges aren't as prepared as they should be. Unfortunately, you can't call foul on me, but most judges will in fact call foul on themselves and go find out what they need to do by continuing something to make sure that your client gets the benefit of everything that you presented.
Well, Judge, what are your views on civility, its importance, and whether it's on the decline or the rise? My perspective as a more mature or older lawyer, maybe, let's say, is just that, I think that by and large, our Northern Kentucky bar is fairly civil. But what's your perspective, Judge, and your experiences in the courtroom with lawyers?
Well, I think most lawyers are civil. And I think some of what creates not being civil is defensiveness and perhaps not being prepared. The other thing I think is transparency. I think nowadays everybody thinks someone else is getting a better deal because they know somebody. So there's a lot of behaviors out there where, let's see, you see me having a lunch with someone. First of all, I'm paying for my own lunch. But second of all, I think someone thinks that gives somebody this full heads up. So that's been happening for as long as I've practiced and on the bench. So you always think, oh, I'm in trouble. But, I think just being forthright, that doesn't really affect most people. And if it does at my level, I recuse if it creates, any kind of real concern about conflict. But I think most people are civil. I do think that this has made people a little bit more uncivilized. I'm not quite sure what the next generation will feel like about this. So this is one of my favorite things on Zoom. Yes, Judge. So I'm trying to figure out how you think typing on your phone makes me feel as if you're listening to me. Which is, one of the reasons I don't generally bring my phone out to the bench with me, but I've lost all the clocks in here, so I brought it out to look at time. But, I do think that's unconscious. And so really not an intentional violation. It's what's good about it is people can come to court, and when they're not in front of me, they can do work. I don't mind people using their phones and their computers in my courtroom because they're not really in front of me. And so if they can continue to communicate and work, that's fine. I hope that civility continues. I do think, and the other thing that I'm fearful about with this whole movement to do everything remote is, when I was growing up, when I first walked into the courtroom, I was Joe Summe's daughter. And it's only through meeting lawyers, having lunch with them, talking with them, sharing cases with them, whether I was working with them or working with the other side, the other client, that's the only way they got to know me. And I don't know that Zoom is going to do that. I think it's better that we see each other than just being telephonic, but I don't know that you really can get the measure of somebody, because, I'm not flailing my hands all over the place like I would if I was in court right now. I'm on Zoom, right? So you're not getting the full flavor when I do this to you. So, you know, anyway, I hope it doesn't, but I do think most young people want to work with one another. I don't find them abrasive. I find somehow the same behaviors as when I was young are there. They're a little defensive, like you've got to be, you know, really strong in order to be taken seriously. But that's just something they'll get over as they mature. So yeah, I think everybody's pretty civil, actually.
I do too. It's encouraging. And Judge, what are some of your biggest successes? We typically wind up the programs with some what I would call, you know, big questions. What do you think are some of your greatest sources of satisfaction outside the practice of law and serving as a judge?
Well, my biggest legal satisfaction was I was able to get through a really large tax case and actually understand the taxes in order to write the opinion. That was probably one of my favorite successes here. You know, yeah, I probably don't have as good a balance of life as some people. Never been over good at that. I've always been kind of a worker bee. So I balance that out by travel and actually take those chunks of time and travel. So that's how, you know, I balance it out. You know, mostly learning how to enjoy my family, trying to learn how to stay, you know, home at night. Still not as good at that. Still roam a lot during the evening and going to see people. And but you know, most of my career was out at night. But you know, trying to balance more of family. I have a lovely family. I don't have any children, but I have nieces and I had nephews and a great nephew. And so try to spend time with them. I have, you know, still 4 great siblings, and we share birthdays together and try to travel together once a year to small weekends. And so, you know, nothing, you know, to me, I used to think life was going to be this big explosion all the time. It's just nice and pleasant. And so I'm real happy with it.
Travel and family. That's excellent. And so now you know, here I am asking a judge this question, but I'm going to do it anyway because every legend has been asked this question. Tell us something about you that people probably don't already know, generally.
I love construction.
All right.
Yeah, Sunday after Mass, we traveled around and looked at all the new construction. And I really do think that if I had more teaching as a young person, I might be in construction. You know, and and the typical things I like to read, you know, so, you know, there's really nothing extraordinary. You know, I like to spend time with people that I love. But, you know, mostly that I used to like clothes, not so much. So I'm not a shopper anymore. So all the things that I used to like to do, they've all gone away mostly. So maybe just construction.
Well, if you love construction, you love being in Covington right now. What a great transformation we've all witnessed.
Well, watching DBL go up over there. They got a new DBL going up. Yeah, and it keeps getting bigger. It got so much bigger. I thought it was going to be a smaller footprint. So.
Well, and finally, Judge, before we may or may not have questions in the queue, but before we go there, I just wanted you to offer an opportunity to pass along words of wit and wisdom to the next generation of lawyers in our region in Northern Kentucky.
So, rule 1, show up. Rule 2, the moment you feel defensive, take a deep breath. It's really the other person just doing what they got to do, and treat it without lots of emotion if you can. And rule 3, always be as prepared as you can be. You know, in law school, they used to tell you the other side may be more this or more that, but nobody can out-prepare you. Well, with so much information out there now, I don't know that you can be as prepared as everybody thinks that they can be prepared. And then, you know, then just learn how to flex with that and overall understand your own personality and how that personality may or may not affect other people. And again, that goes back to whether or not you should be defensive or not. But that's, mostly, young girls sometimes are brought up to be fairly perfect. So sometimes when that doesn't happen, we get a little defensive, I think. So just don't be defensive and show up.
Well, and as we move on to questions, let me check here. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, but I did want to ask one other, and when we interviewed Will Ziegler, we asked this question, and he had just a terrific personal response, and I know you're a person of strong faith, and so the question very generally is the role that faith has played in your life and your professional practice and serving as a judge.
Faith is extremely important to me. My father used to say to me, and it's an old song, if this is all there is, just break out the booze and have a ball. That's all there is. And so as I've gotten older, I've been more involved with my faith from a more technical position, reading the Bible and things. But I went to Xavier and took theology. And, religion is not only cultural, it's really purposeful. And it's the reason that you should do things. I mean, if all you're doing is being nice to somebody because that's what civility says, that's great. And I hope you do that. But it doesn't have as much meaning. Civility and faith make what's going to happen next really important. I do believe there's a God. I do believe that there's an afterlife. And so I do believe that you're held accountable for your actions and how you treat one another. And so that goes back to community and why you need to be involved with it, not just so that you can reap some monetary or friendship rewards out of it. So as I get older, I'm really happy that faith was always important to me. I just guess I realize now how much more important it is. Then it was something I did, and I did take solace from it. But when you lose people in your life, and everybody does, and when you have those moments that you feel like you're an utter failure and you've got to pick yourself up again, you have to look at that word desperate, and despair is something that God just does not put up with, because then you've basically forsaken him. And so you got to go, okay, why am I here again? And so faith is that circular thing that brings me back always to why we're here to begin with. And so I think faith is really important because I do not think we're just bodies that are suspended in space, living here for a period of time and then gone. And I know some people may feel that way, but I don't.
Judge, thank you. And as we wrap up today, on behalf of the Northern Kentucky Bar, we appreciate your continued support, your assistance to the NKBA, your accessibility to practicing members in our profession has just been extraordinary. And thank you for your service to the community. We appreciate you very much, Judge Summe.
I appreciate you all too. Just remember, I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for you all.
Well, on that note, attendees, join us for our next interview. These programs take place live on the second Tuesday of each month. They'll continue for the duration of 2021. Next month, on September 14th, we'll be interviewing NKBA legend Frank Warnock. Frank is a longtime member of the Bar Association. He's one of the premier municipal and government lawyers in the region. And one of the things we've tried to do with these programs is present to all lawyers, but also our newer lawyers, a broad cross-section of practices that have been represented: corporate, labor, municipal, criminal, views from the bench. And this municipal view is going to be, I think, particularly interesting and valuable. Our executive director, Julie Jones, she, for the live attendees, she'll be sending out CLE information. Hey, and please keep in mind that we really do want your input. We need your input at the NKBA. contact us with your program recommendations. And if you contact Julie or contact me and just say, hey, Rob, why isn't so-and-so a legend? We will take your call and talk about it. And we hope this program will continue into 2022 as well. Hey, thank you for joining us. Everybody have a terrific day.